but the victor.
Um,
Okay, thanks, Andy, for that reminder. Thank you very much.
okay, Scott, I think you're on now.
Okay, so we're glad you're here. Very briefly, we're going to hear from some panelists. They'll be introducing themselves. We'll have some breakout rooms. What we want to do is be as flexible as we can on the fly to adjust to what you came here for. So understand there will be fluidity here. And while George is introducing the workshop, it'd be great if in chat you put in, why are you here? So the panelists know how to gear up their comments to you. So as George is introducing this, if you could put in chat, that would be great.
Yeah, and I already said this, but all except for our breakout rooms is being recorded so everyone can learn from this. You can share this with anyone else. It may be shared on other sites if possible. We want to share whatever comes out of this workshop with as many, particularly white men, as possible, but anyone else is welcome, obviously, to see it too. Please maintain confidentiality of what's shared in the breakout room time. And now, in the interest of brevity, I'm going to just say we want to acknowledge that we're living on stolen land here as non-native people, and each of you, I'm on Ohlone land. I'm sure a lot of you know of your land. I think in the chat somebody's putting how you can find what land you're on if you know that. And also, please do whatever it takes for you to be present here, to just get relaxed and into the flow of this workshop. If you need to close your eyes for a minute or two or that, and also during the workshop, if you need to take a bio break or something like that, just do it as you need to. Scott?
We're really so excited that you're here to discuss white men's greater involvement in social justice movements. And that's plural. You're welcome here for whichever aspect of social justice movements you're interested in contributing to. This is going to be a really great meeting. There'll be a follow-up meeting that's about tools and techniques. This is more overview about being inspired to organize. We want to give a special thanks to Andy Swindler, who behind the scenes is our wonderful Zoom operator for the music, the waiting room, the breakout rooms, and we couldn't do this meeting without him. So thank you very much, Andy. You can see him right over there on my screen at least. So thank you, Andy. And just so you know, after the meeting is officially over, we're going to stay for another 15 minutes or so just to chat informally. It won't be recorded. Sometimes that's really powerful what comes up there. So that's optional for you. Back to you, George.
I'm just trying to see what I'm supposed to be saying. I think we're going to just have a brief introduction of the panelists now, and this is going to be very brief. And this is not our panel discussion, but they're just trying to introduce themselves very briefly. So, George Hrbek, could you introduce yourself?
Said my name is George Hrbek. I live in Cleveland, Ohio. I've been involved in anti-racism work since 1958, and I'm continuing that today. And I'm especially gratified to be able to work with all of the young people who are at that place in their own lives, dealing with the issue today, even.
Noah, why don't you go next? You're the middle of the age category.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. My name is Noah Kruis. I use he and him pronouns. I am based in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I too have been doing this work for a good chunk of my life, which began long after George started his work. I'm currently serving as the Chief of Staff at Crossroads Anti-Racism Organizing and Training. And I'll pass it to Justin.
Thank you all and good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you all, and you all are the reason I do this work, to be in community. My name is Justin Haas, and I was born in Chicago and grew up in New Mexico, and right now currently reside in Washington, D.C. on Piscataway and Anacostan land. This is an incredible event for me because I've been doing social justice work for about a decade formally, but since I was a child, I was raised by two civil rights lawyers as parents. And so I felt like I got introduced to the movement very young. And so being on a call with people who have worked in similar spaces to me, whether it's in around climate change, whether it's around police brutality, affordable housing, these are the areas that I'm incredibly passionate about. And to be alongside with you all tonight, it's going to be exciting to see what we can create together and to kind of further hold myself accountable to that narrative. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much, George, Justin, Noah. That's fantastic. This is going to be such a great meeting. In a moment, we're about to move into super quick breakout rooms. There's going to be 3 very brief breakout rooms of 4 minutes each. We're calling this an organizer's speed meeting. You're going to go to the breakout room.
Turn right at the traffic light. They take the first exit.
Please
You're
mute your,
going to go to the breakout room and introduce yourself to one another. While you're here, we're going to put some prompt questions in chat in a moment. And then through the magic of Zoom, Andy will bring you into a breakout room. You'll say yes. You'll have 4 minutes. You're going to come back to the main room. And then you immediately go back out again 2 more times. And this gives you an opportunity to just get to know one another, break the ice, and share while you're here. Does anyone have any questions?
God, I don't know if you said it, but it's one-on-one. You're just with one other person.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And it's
Just to be
completely
clear.
random. The questions, in case you haven't seen it, are if you're already involved in social justice movement, what are you really struggling with, and what are the issues? If you're not involved, what prevents you from getting involved in already existing social justice movements? But you can also discuss whatever you feel is important for you with your partner. Andy, we're actually ahead of schedule, but we should roll when you're ready. And we're all being it, including panelists. You could end up with one of the panelists. It's completely random.
This is a great way of building connections. So let's do it.
All right, here we go. First room
Thank you.
open right now.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Justin to explain our next activity.
Excellent, y'all. So I'm going to share my screen. I think some of you have had the opportunity to do some kind of work like this before. This is a Jamboard, and we're using this data. A lot of our work tonight is not only just hearing and fielding questions between all of the group members, but also really starting to think about this action component. I think leaving here tonight with something that you can do, to think about, to work on is going to be essential, because that is one of the most inspiring things when you know what to do. I think we often talk about, and I'll go into this a little bit later, but the work. What is actually the work, and the definition of that and the specificity of that needs to be shared out more widely with white men, because I think a lot of them are just swirling in whatever privileges / ignorance / other things that have or just life events. So it's about really thinking about what are the values that you're interested in, and let's move forward into them. Here's a Jamboard, and I think I will just put it in the chat, and I'll describe to everyone what it is. If someone can give me a thumbs up when they open it, that they can open it and they can work on it. Oh, great. Someone's just drawing. Perfect. So this is a collective document. There are also a couple of pages. But first thing I'm going to share with you is that in the top middle part of the screen, there's a 1 through 3. That means if you keep going, you'll see that it's the same questions pop up over and over again. But we're really focused on these 2 main questions. If you're involved in social justice movements, what are you struggling with? I was just having a fantastic conversation in a breakout room about how important these networks of men are, whether we're going through struggle, whether they're going through great victory, politically or not. Having this network is so important. So what are the things that you're struggling with, whether it has to do with white men organizing or just in general or in the social justice space? And then the next question is, if you're not involved, what prevents you from getting involved? And one thing that I would say just for this group, because I know that most of you do some type of organizing work already, I would urge you to think about not necessarily adding another social justice space to your plate, but maybe a social justice space that you feel a little bit of discomfort with. And right now, that for me is moving more fully into a kind of liberatory pro-Palestinian space as a Jewish man. So what does that look like, and how do I get more involved? What's preventing me from getting more further involved, and so forth? So the way it works is, if you're going to go to the left-hand side, you're going to see all these different icons. You're going to click on the thing that says sticky note, which is right below the mouse key, and it'll pop up with something like this. When you see that, you can just type anything. So one thing that I'm struggling with is a network of men who talk, let's just say, who talk about social, emotional issues, as well as.
Justin, one of the participants is saying he needs added access.
Okay. Okay, great. I will send that out right now. Network of men who can talk about social, emotional issues as well as political ones. And then this will pop up when you say save, and then it'll populate, and you can place it wherever you'd like to place it. Okay. Let me get the. I think everyone. Let me share this. Make sure. Okay. Anyone with the link? Let me do this. All right. Now I think if you reopen the link that's in the chat, everyone should be able to open it. And give me a thumbs up when you can. Great. Russell says yes. So let's take a few minutes. If this sheet gets overpopulated, you can move on to the next one. But this is just kind of take a couple of minutes just to really dive deep into yourself and think about these two different questions. If you find yourself having some difficulties to find something, you can just start reading a few of the sticky notes and see if they have that promotes a thought or idea. Remember, as this one gets too popular, you can move on to the second page, maybe about another minute. Ooh, I like this one about still learning and don't want to make mistakes. I like that one. Overwhelmed and swirling. It feels like there aren't so many role models, examples out there. Excellent. Yep. I felt that for sure too.
I would mention out of this workshop, we're going to try to share as much as we possibly can with stuff that doesn't disclose people's names, with protecting anonymity, but ideas and connections.
Struggling with performative work versus real work. Love that honesty and vulnerability. Yeah. Oof. Interrupting abuse in the moment of calling out injustice and being punished as a result. These are excellent, you all. Maybe take 30 seconds and just read a few if you have the chance. Calling in POC, yep. A lot of this work is going to help us decide what are kind of our next few topics are going to be in our next exercise, in our next workshop in a little while. So thank you all for doing this. Scott, should I pass it back to you?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for reading them out loud, Justin. That was really exciting to hear these. And thanks everyone for participating in that. And you can continue to fill those in if you would like to, or to continue to read them. In a moment, what we're going to do is we're going to turn to the panel and ask them some questions. They're going to respond briefly. And then we're also going to have time for some short questions to the panelists. And then we will have a breakout room coming up where you'll have the opportunity to talk through some of these ideas and make some concrete action plans. So I'm going to turn it over to George to ask the first, second, or third question, this first and second question.
Well, the first basic question, I think we've somewhat answered with the panelists of what motivated you to get involved. But if you want to go into any more depth on that, and also basically we want to say white people have the responsibility to address racism and white men have the responsibility to address sexism. Please share what this means to you and the importance of motivating white men to do progressive organizing. And I think we were going to start again with George, weren't we, Scott? George, could you kick it off and then pass it on to one of the other two panelists? Unmute yourself, please, George.
George, you're muted. Can you?
He's unmuted now. No, he's still muted. George, you need to unmute.
Or can
I
there we
remember
go.
them.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah.
George Hrbek. While we talk about really reaching white men and getting more white men involved, and I know that this is the focus of this particular gathering this evening, I think that it's very important that we recognize already that there's many women who are probably more involved even than men. And one of the things that I think we need to realize is, first of all, that probably in every community there is also already a group or groups that are involved in social justice work. Some focused on anti-sexism, some focused on anti-racism. But I think that it's very important, no matter what community we're in, that we begin to identify those groups, because I think they're a way of, if we're not involved, they're a way of us beginning to get involved, to get attached to that group and see what some of those folks are doing. And I think that's critically important. We don't have to initiate anything, but we can become part of a group that will help us to initiate in whatever circles that we move in, including involving other white men.
So thank you very much. This is a theme that both Justin and George have mentioned, that the movement is already happening. There are already organizations out there, and you can join what's already out there. So I'm going to turn it now to Justin for the question that George asked a moment ago, which was if you could comment on the importance to you of motivating white men to do progressive organizing.
Absolutely. So many things have motivated me. I think that it's important to recognize my parents and where they come from. My dad was a civil rights attorney in Chicago in 1967, 1968, and 1969. He ended up being the attorney for Mark Clark and Fred Hampton's family. Fred Hampton, the Black Panther, who was murdered in his bed at 4:30 in the morning by the Chicago police, and that ended up his work unraveled a whole COINTELPRO sting operation that affected both the Black Panthers and many organizations and activist groups at that moment. So I was raised in some ways. I often tell the story when I was growing up. I didn't get involved in Harry Potter because what was in front of me was the autobiography of Malcolm X. My first demonstration was when I was 3 weeks old to a gender equality protest. And so I didn't have this kind of coming to age story. I was brought up in that space. And recognize that to rebel against that would be to rebel against being a human being, because I saw who my babysitters were Puerto Rican nationalists, and people that I went to see in prisons were political prisoners, and the people that my parents looked up to were people who helped define the movement. And then as I got older, because so much of my life I was like, well, I want to become a Fred Hampton. And what made Fred Hampton was the organizing that he did and the people around him. And so being one of these major high-profile people was something that I had to kind of reimagine, because I wanted to be in much larger community with people who are struggling against the world's atrocities. So Fred Hampton is my own motivator. My mother works on kicking out coal plants in New Mexico and figuring out what a new energy economy would look like. And so these are shining guiding lights as motivators, and figuring out what's my role in that. But I think more concretely for my own personal development was Howard Zinn. I think that the quote that really has stuck with me is, you can't be neutral on a moving train. And us as white men are already moving in a pretty tough direction, just by having the identity that I do, how the world interprets me. There are things that are associated with my character and my being that I'm trying to unlearn. And that's the moving part that I want to continue to push. King has this quote that says, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. And I think this kind of, promotion of no matter who you are, what skills you have, the movement should welcome you. And so when I think about organizing white men, we need to be welcoming white men. The last motivator person, I would say, is Archbishop Oscar Romero, who was a Jesuit priest in El Salvador during the Civil War that occurred, and he was first picked by the rich to be kind of a person who would give sermons exclusively to them, and recognize that the church, that his belief in what the church stood for was at a direct perpendicularity to just feeding into the ideas of the rich. And so he started to rebel against that, and ended up being assassinated by death squads that the United States pushed for. And so I think that's the piece that I think is so important. Yes, I don't think white men, as progressive white men, need to go out and search for the hardest, the most right-wing white men that we can try to convert. But I do think that we as all individuals do progress, and we do shift, and we do change, and that's where our humanity comes from in a lot of ways. At least that's my belief. And so investigating where white men are, wherever they are, and bringing them into the movement is really critical. So I'll stop there. Yeah, I'll pass it to Noah.
Well, actually, I have a quick follow-up question, if I may. It's personal if you don't want to take it. Did your parents as organizers ever specifically talk to you or other people specifically about organizing white men? Did that come up as a topic? It's personal. You don't have to answer if you don't want.
You know, I think that there was discussions. I mean, there's discussions around SDS. There was discussions on the Weather Underground. I'm named after a political prisoner who was defiant against this government in protest of apartheid and our support of apartheid. And there was a lot of discussion around what does it mean to mobilize people who have the means to do direct action. I think the discussion of white supremacy and how it's so ingrained in all of us is a much more current understanding of white people. And so actually I'm doing what's kind of beautiful about this work is that I'm getting to do this kind of work with my mother, and kind of work with her in discussions around how does our white supremacy show up and how does that create a barrier in relating to people of color or indigenous people or trans people, right? And that's not exactly the answer, but this is what I got.
That's great. Thanks. I'm going to turn it now to you. You know, what do you see as the importance of organizing white men specifically?
Yeah, I wanted to also start with some a little background and what motivates me into this work. I, like Justin, grew up in the state of New Mexico, and I'm going to tell a little bit of the story of the generations who came before me as well, because I think that really is important in understanding our shaping. I grew up on the edge of the Navajo reservation. My parents were both physicians. They wanted to serve in an underserved community, and they chose that community because it was also where my father had grown up. His parents had been Christian missionaries on the reservation. And so I grew up in this family in which the sort of legacy was people coming to do good in a place where they perceived a need. I was surrounded by that in my grandparents, the sort of Christian church world, in my parents, the healthcare world, and in the school that I attended, which was also a bunch of white teachers coming to teach. And in all those spaces, most, if not all of my peers were indigenous people, indigenous young people. And I grew up thinking, what great people my parents are, what great people my grandparents were. They are providing these important services in underserved communities, which is true. And then I got to college and attended an anti-racism workshop, and part of that workshop was uncovering history. And one of the pieces of history that I learned about was the history of residential schools. The US government's participation with churches of varying denominations to establish schools that removed children from their families and assimilated them intentionally. The explicit message being, kill the Indian to save the man. And as I sat in that workshop as a first-year college student, I recognized the school I attended from kindergarten through 12th grade was one of those schools. And that the youth who grew up alongside of me were shaped in that space in a way that no one would say explicitly at that time, but was training people to be in white society. And so it's no wonder that I excelled in that space and graduated second in my class, second only to another white guy. And it makes me look back at those institutions, the education system that educated everyone to be like white men, so I excelled, the healthcare system that was designed to keep white men healthy, and the Christian church that is built on a lot of patriarchy, and so white men were elevated in that space as well. And so no wonder that I felt really affirmed as a very good person in all those spaces. So that has been a lot of the reckoning in my life, is holding this sort of contradiction of being a part of those communities, having that part of my family legacy, and trying to uncover that. And I think one important step for all of us here, and for as we consider the white men around us in our communities and our families, is to ask that question of what shaped us, what formed us, how were we formed, how do the institutions around us inform who we are and how we operate the way we are. And I think then also the challenge put before us is, as we move into the spaces that we do work, whether that is like very explicit movement work or the sort of quotidian. There were a lot of people who identified as educators in this room. You're part of an education system, so asking the question of what can I do to shape whatever I have control over, whether that's just in my classroom. How can I shape things so that white maleness is not the very center of this. And I want to name also, importantly, like I have a partner who's a woman and 3 kids, and the fact that I'm here with you tonight means that she is doing a lot of the household duties of feeding and getting people to bed, and so I'm grateful to her for that. But I also want to name, like, that's an important part for me as well, is like, how do I find balance? And some of that is making space for her to go door knocking over the last several weeks, and so there's that give and take as well. I think that's an important thing to name also, that as close to home as in your own space.
Okay, thanks very much, Noah. We're going to do 2 more rounds. Or did you want to say something, George Hrbek?
Yeah, I wanted to say something because I really appreciate what my other 2 panelists have shared with you. And I want to say I never really thought about white men being involved in anti-racism, because my background was in a immigrant community. My forebears came from Bohemia, and they were part of a whole Czech enclave, or a Bohemian enclave. And the men would gather every Sunday at my grandparents' home, and they would have these discussions about politics and racism and so on, and they were anti-racist. And I have to say that through all of my formative years, the anti-racists that I knew, at least who expressed all of that and attempted to live that out in their own lives, were my dad, my uncles, my grandparents, my grandfathers. And that was true even how I got involved in the church, because I came involved with a pastor who was anti-racist. And so my contact and my exposure to anti-racism was through my uncles, my aunts, my father, and my grandfathers and my grandmothers, and also through other people in the community. And most of them were men who were involved. So I have to indicate that it was really men who were primarily involved in involving me, or at least encouraging me to go in that direction and become an integral part of an anti-racist or a social justice movement, that I had a responsibility as a citizen of this country and as a human being. And it was a great influence on the direction of my life. And it was primarily from men, not only from men, but primarily from men, white men.
That sounds great. So it sounds like you had some good role models there, which is one of the things that somebody put in one of those stickers that Justin read about role models. We're going to do 1 more round of questions for the panel, and we're going to combine 2 questions. One is, how can we inspire more white men to do the work? And what has kept your stamina going for as long as you've been in the movement? So how can we inspire more white men, and what has kept your stamina going? I'm going to turn to you first, George Hrbek, and then we'll do the same order we did before. So inspiration and maintaining stamina.
Well, first of all, I believe that that people more readily act their way into a new kind of thinking rather than think their way into a new kind of acting. So one of the ways I've approached it is to get people involved in doing something that in which they would get exposed to the issue and get educated about the issue. So that was my approach. And that was my approach, not when we talk about white men, I want to talk about also college students, male college students, getting them involved, giving them opportunity to grow into that, into understanding what was going on in the world and understand why it was going on and what were the causes of it, and to begin to see how they could become involved. So that's the approach that I used. And I'm glad to say that most of the young people that I'm with today continue to use that approach by getting people involved in some kind of activity that begins to open up to them, in which they discover some things about themselves. They begin to realize something about how the society operates, and how racism and sexism have been are embedded in the society through policies and practices and so on. So that's the approach that I've used, and I see young people using that approach today, rather than simply trying to convince people that they ought to become involved, but giving them an opportunity to discover by getting them involved in something that exposes them to what's going on.
Okay, great. And then Justin, both in your own life and from what you saw from your parents, how do we inspire white men, and what maintains the stamina to stay in it for the long haul?
Isn't this the question, right? I don't know. I think part of being a role model is really showing what changes have happened since organizing, since you started organizing, whether that's relationships, whether that's relationship to yourself, whether that's your feeling around discomfort and knowing that you're going to have to get uncomfortable to do this work. I think being able to express to white men that I have become more whole as a human being is critical. And it's important to celebrate small victories because big ones take a long time and they take a lot of preparation. I think we have to, inspiring white men, and I lead a men's group, and we have these three tenets that we come back to frequently. And that is, action and healing and education. All three of those are very, very important in this space because the healing element is what's going to give us the stamina to move forward, to rely on, to have a network, to recognize when you're burnt out. The education is the lighthouse that you don't have to feel like you're reinventing the wheel every time, but you're also much more knowledgeable about how several different communities access the solution through different means. And so that's another way to think about not feeling like I have to have all the answers. When as white men, I feel like if we're in this space, it's like you've gone through the hurdles already of being in predominantly people of color spaces or predominantly women's spaces and so forth. When in reality, it's like, I still have to progress myself. That just being included in those spaces is not enough. I think because of my upbringing and because of just the way I see the tentacles of capitalism and racism intersecting to just defile humanity, is that disruption is really important. Discomfort has to lead to disruption, and that can look really different from a multitude of, whether it's in your job, whether it's in your relationship, whether it's with your friends. But I think me as white men, when my white men say it's just all, dandelions and rainbows, that's not the case. And it's not the case because of, whether it's like you have to go out, at night and you do mutual aid runs. That is true, but it's also the fact that, once you say, I don't want to hear racist jokes anymore with your friends, that you stick to them. And that the disruption inevitably is that. Now, I know these systems are not going to be dismantled by you not hearing toxic jokes anymore, but I do think it builds a muscle. It builds a muscle so that when your boss says, hey, I think that this funding we could use to, pay our salaries more or whatever, that would be something you could stand up to because you've done it in the past. And the disrupting is really, really critical. And that means you're forgoing potential privileges that you would get. The inspiration is what I was talking to Greg about, that the idea of being able to grow up and be in a network of men who are thinking the same things with you provides kind of the antidote for loneliness. My mother talks about how action and activism is the antidote for loneliness, and how much of our lives are we disconnected from each other, and specifically with white men. And the last thing I'll say is there was an article that came out around male friendships, and if nothing else, activism done with kindness and humility, with healing, but with a real component of discomfort and disruption, can lead to a reversal of what we're so often taught, that we have to do it alone, that our ideas are the best, and so forth. So I'm doing this work to be inspired so that my future self, when I'm 40, 50, 60 years old, has other people to rely on. And it's not just people of color, and it's not just women that does that heavy lifting. It's that I can actually call up a friend and say, I need a hug. And that's not the first time I've done that in 25 years. It's that I've done it last year because of this thing. And that's what's going to help me say, yeah, I can go talk to my boss this way, or I can go and organize a union, or I can, do things like that. So those are the things that are coming up for me.
Okay, before I turn it to Justin, I'm sorry, to Noah, please continue in chat. When I go to meetings, I participate by doing chat. So if you have questions, you have comments, you like what people are saying, please participate by doing chat. And so for Noah, not only in terms of the organization Crossroads, but also in your own life, both, how do you inspire more men, and how do you keep the stamina going for yourself?
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you both, George and Justin, for all that you shared. Trying to think of things to add on to that, but I think one important idea in terms of inspiring people is really modeling. What does it look like to be an anti-racist white man? And that is an idea that I think we don't see in action very often. And so when I think about that, and when I talk and am in conversation with the people of color who are my colleagues, I think the tendency for white people engaged in anti-racism work, for men engaged in anti-sexism work, is to put ourselves in a position of listening, which is important, and putting ourselves in a position of following, which is also important, to be able to follow the leadership of women and people of color. And yet the idea of anti-racism is not this sort of like flip the script and have white men be minimized to something that is less than full humanity, or something that is less than a full participant in the work. And in fact, because we are operating in institutions and in a society that does give us a platform as white men, that gives us undeserved attention and respect and trust from the get-go. One of the biggest pieces of feedback that I hear from the women of color who I work closely with is, we need you white men to show up when it's time for you to show up, when there are decisions being made, and when my voice as a woman of color is not gonna hold much water in the room. That's when we need you to speak up and to come alongside. And so looking for those opportunities for us, I think also can inspire other white men to have an idea of what it looks like to fit into that role of an anti-racist white man. And not just think of us as like we're just gonna sort of remove ourselves from the equation. We're gonna listen, we're gonna read a lot of books. and listen to all the podcasts and know the right answer when someone actually calls on us, but no, to really step up. And I think in terms of stamina and sticking with it, the beauty and the joy that comes alongside the real hard work that comes out of relationship, that comes from being in community with people who are different and who have different perspectives. That's something that brings me into this. A white man quote that I'd like to share is Wendell Berry, who's a farmer and a poet and a novelist and all sorts of things in his long life. But the quote comes from the poem Manifesto of the Mad Farmer Liberation Front, and just this one line that says, "Be joyful, even though you have considered all the facts." And so we can know that there's all kinds of wrong out there and all kinds of brokenness, all kinds of evil in the world that is wrought through our institutions, through our society, and yet what does it look like to find joy in life alongside one another? So that's what keeps me going.
Well, thank you for that, George. My co-facilitator knows that's why I always bring up, how can we have more joy in these meetings? How can we make the meetings that people want to come back to? Someone said, I blank on the name, I'm sorry, how to make it irresistible and so on. So yeah, thank you for that. Just for full transparency, we have just under 10 minutes now to ask the panelists some questions. If you can raise your physical hand, we'll do the best we can to see who raised their hand. Please make it concise so we can do as many questions as possible. I know there's a lot of educators and guidance counselors here. You want to ask a specific question about education, about guidance counseling, about how to inspire, how to organize, please raise your hand and we will get to as many questions as we can. I see Lynn first, so please. And I see Sasha second. Feel like it's an auction, sorry, but I see Josh. Great, okay.
Yeah, first I just want to say I truly appreciate this gathering. I started organizing with Surge Bay Area. I'm not organizing with them now, but I was organizing around the murder of Philando Castile and the election of Donald Trump. And spent about a year doing that, and there were many meetings where there were 50 people there, and I was, one of 3 or 4. So, I recognize that it's very difficult to bring white men specifically, into the anti-racist movement. And I would just love to hear an analysis of why it is so difficult to organize white men specifically, and especially straight white men. And what are the blockages? And maybe I would just stop there. Why is it hard to organize them? What are the blockages? And I think there could be a later step of thinking about how do we work specifically with those blockages. That's my question.
Any of the panelists can step forward now.
I would say that first of all, I never really focused on white men. My ministry was focused on whites. As far as I was concerned, the anti-racism work that I did had to be focused on whites, and it wasn't simply men. And I found what I discovered in the process of learning and how to most effectively do this was by not simply dealing with men, but also dealing with men and women in a smaller group and having them in a situation in which they felt free and safe to be able to share where they were at, what their feelings were, and recognizing that they had something really to share with each other and help each other. So the men that really became involved in the work that we did was through smaller groups like that. And I had quite a long meeting with Dr. King in Chicago in the basement of a union hall, and he really emphasized that if you're going to focus on whites, you want to make sure that you're not doing it simply academically, but you're doing it experientially and giving people an opportunity to discover. So you've got to find a more dramatic way of working with white people so that you're not simply preaching at them or trying to convince them intellectually, but you have to be able to reach not simply their minds, but also their hearts and help them understanding the very nature of racism. And so that was the approach we took when I was in Chicago in the anti-racism work I did and in organizing an anti-racism community. And I found that it was most effectively when you dealt with a group, because they became mutually supportive to one another, and community became so important so that an individual didn't feel they had to be a lone wolf in this. They were part of a group, a community who were mutually supportive, encouraging one another and learning together and sharing their experiences together and coming together with some kind of collective wisdom in moving ahead with what they were doing.
Okay, thank you. If it's okay with Justin and Noah, I'm going to have Sasha ask his question, and then you can answer the first question along with Sasha, and then we also want to get Josh in. So how about if Sasha asks the question, then Josh, you ask your question, and the panelists can answer the question they want. Okay, so Sasha was next, I believe, and then I'll hear Josh's question.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you. Thank you to the panelists and thank you to everybody. It feels encouraging to be here. And my question, I'm a teacher, and just sort of following what George was saying, my question is, how do you, I just put in the chat, I'm just curious, how do you support students, young white men, and young white people, right? Male students, male identified, however you want to put it, right? But young male students to understand that their, disruption maybe is part of, it's sort of like build a long-term goal, right? Beyond like a class, beyond a week, beyond a semester, because it can feel sort of like overwhelming. Like I have to do everything in this one class or in this one semester, which is too short. And so I wonder, like, how do you create that where you understand that you're like one teacher and hopefully there'll be more teachers, and this is sort of part of like a longer term work to do?
Okay, thanks. Let's hear Josh's question, and the panelists can answer them all together if they want. So Josh, please.
Yeah, thank you. And it's great to be in community with everyone here. And thank you to the panelists. They're wonderful. So as an educator, I'm very passionate about equity in education, and I'm very vocal in elevating the voices of the Black women I work with, who are grateful. It was terrifying to get there, but that's a good place to be for me and for them. And I'm frequently finding myself confronting bias motivated abuse of children in schools, mostly perpetrated by white men. And this may be an issue with my own stamina, but I've been called self-righteous because of my behavior. I've been told to mind my business, been told to stop reporting, and it's just honestly for me, it's a massive weight around this. Can't ignore it, right? That's not cool. But I'm just thinking that my question is like, how do I process this? How do I think about this in a different way?
Thank you.
I would suggest that Noah might have some good answers to this.
That's exactly what I was going to say. We're thinking like Noah always goes last. We're going to turn to you first. If that's okay, Noah.
Sure. Wow. Thanks, Josh, for sharing that. That is a really tough spot to be in. And I do think there's something important about being willing to risk, being willing to take the heat, to stick your neck out there, even when people are pushing back, and like self-righteousness, if that righteousness is real, that's probably okay. I think there's so much in our society has not held white men accountable to the rules that are set supposedly for everyone, that we use against especially men of color in so many ways. And so when white men are being held accountable, are being reported for the harm that they are doing, it's not surprising that there's pushback, there's kickback, there's long been a willingness of society to look the other way and to allow, and the stories that surface from time to time, whether that's the Me Too movement or the clergy sex scandals, if nothing else, like, you want to be on the right side of history, and so I want to encourage you in that, and I think hopefully to identify others in your institution who share that integrity. Yes, Russell, to be a good ancestor, right? That people can look back and say that you were someone who inspired, that you were someone who did the right thing, that, maybe someone will make a biopic of you someday about how you stood up to the and not that that's the motivation, but yeah, that's a hard spot to be in. I do think it's important to find collegiality and solidarity with others too, so it's not just you, so that it is so that you're part of a group, a critical mass of movement in your institution. Yeah, I hope that helps a little bit. I don't know, Justin, you want to?
I'd love to, because I'm an educator, and so I teach 6th grade, and so I really appreciate both of these questions a lot. Speaking to the situation that you're in, Josh, I just want to say that I am here for you, that I love what you're doing, and I need you to stay strong in that, whether you confront the people every day or not. But I know that when you're in a position where you feel like you're the only one speaking out, it can get very lonely. And then I often feel like I start to critique myself, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be doing the right thing anymore. Like, what am I doing? So I'm telling you right now, I'm here, I'm with you, and I want you to keep doing that if you ever feel like you don't have the energy to do so. Not all the time. Disruption for the sake of disruption is not going to create anything. But I think I hope that you know that I, and maybe even the people on this call, are here saying, you got this, you can do it, you should keep doing it. And you're really in the midst of a dilemma. And that's the word that I want to move over into Sasha's question, which is like, how do you talk about social justice work with young white boys, for sure. And I just want to share a brief story, and that is, I taught at a progressive private school, predominantly white space in DC, and now I'm in a completely opposite school where it's 100% Black. It's 95% teachers who are Black. But my story starts with working with white students. And there was this white young boy, this was in 5th grade, and he would get done with his work and he would say, I'm done. And he'd basically not yell it, but he would say it in front of the entire class. And for some odd reason, this kind of triggered for something in me, because this is something that I used to do as a kid, which was to signify that I'm important, that I need to be the one to share my 2 cents. And I need to basically recognize that I needed to share what I felt, which was that I was done. When there was a lot of nonverbal possibilities, right? Go turn in your homework in this way and come sit down and start reading a book, or go ask the teacher. But because I felt like I had the privilege to make everyone understand that me as a white man was done, I saw that in this young boy. And I got so frustrated with this dilemma, this dynamic, that there was a couple of times in a class period where I said, I don't care. He said, I'm done. And I said, I don't care. And that was a moment of me not particularly practicing a lot of classroom management, but it was a moment of me recognizing, whoa, I really don't want him to keep doing this, because I started to feel like, what do the other students feel? What do they feel when he says I'm done? Because they're not done. So this is a critical moment where we had a conversation, me and the boy, and I gave him the dilemma. And I think that's what I would ask of both you, Josh and Sasha, is well, first I would say for Sasha, put the boys in a dilemma. Say, you have a couple of options, pick which one, and then pick whatever one they pick, then you can start to have that conversation. And I think that actually builds the skill that you want, that can possess through that will actually be long-term. If you just say, believe these things, I think it will slide off their back. Or if they're not in that moment, if they're not at a protest or a rally, they're not going to think about it. But if you think about if I get myself into a dilemma, racially motivated, or if it's gender motivated, how do I get out of this? And what are the different alternatives that I could reroute myself from? And the last thing I'd say, Josh, just to your point, is, I don't know if you feel this way, but maybe starting a group at your school. Maybe if it's even 2 or 3 people, 3 or 4 people, because then you have credibility. I think for these other white men, they're like, oh, you're just a Pied Piper. And I think that credibility aspect of like, this is a condoned space by our school that I'd love to invite you into. Might be a good way to start. And it might not happen for months or years, but just starting a group like that allowed me to have future conversations with white colleagues that weren't making the transitions or changes that I thought were necessary for their children.
Okay, we're going to go in breakout rooms in a moment. I don't know if George Hrbek wanted to take 30 seconds, so I were really tight on time to comment on any of that or not.
Well, I would just like to affirm what my other colleagues said. But what I've discovered is that I could never be alone in what I was doing. And it was always important for me to have 3 or 4 or 5 other people that I could meet with regularly, and a group that was mutually supportive and that would encourage one another, and who I could share with and get some advice back with. So I think, it is important. And I think that this has been emphasized, that we find people who may not even be in the venue where we're doing what we're doing, maybe outside that venue. But but being able to have a group that's close and mutually supportive, that trust one another and can encourage and help one another and share with each other the struggles and the challenges that they're having, and be helpful to one another.
Okay, thank you to all the panelists. I think that was really great. I honestly wish we had more time to hear you, but what we decided is we also want to have some action planning, because that can be very inspiring, what your next steps are. So in a moment, you'll be put into breakout rooms that are going to go to about 9:35. And we're going to give you a document. If one person in your group can download this document, take notes, and then share it with the rest of your group afterwards, that would be really great. And I don't know, I can't see if Andy just put it in chat or not. I will put the document in chat right now. And then we're going to put you into breakout rooms. And please use this time to talk about planning. What are your next steps going to be in terms of, or what are the key insights you're going to get to inspire people? That's a document. I assume most people know how to use a Google document. You just go to File, then you do download. You download it to your computer. If one person could take notes for your group, that would be terrific. Does anyone have any? Yeah,
Scott,
please.
do you think that we could just extend it to 9:40? Just because that would be only 11 minutes. I think 16 minutes would be a good.
I'm happy to do that. I don't even know what's looking at the schedule, but thank you. Let's do it for 9:40. Okay, on the fly. So thank you for that, Justin. Okay, so we're going to put you in breakout rooms. The document is there, and the prompts are going to be in chat in a second, and they're also in that document.
Andy, go ahead as soon as you're.
Okay, we're ready to go. Mostly rooms of 3 folks. Here you go.
Nathan, did you want to join a group? So
That's
people here.
That's how I got involved.
Scott, I would encourage us to encourage people to put things they got out of this time together in chat, and that we squeeze the time we share together here, because
exactly.
Otherwise we're not going to have any time for the last section at all.
We think alike. We're on the same. I just put it in there. Okay, so we are recording, so thank you. You heard some of George Hrbek's personal story there, which was fascinating, how he got involved from the religious aspect of this. And can people just raise their hands if they found that useful? I know it was a short amount of time, but how many people found that useful, energizing the breakout rooms? Okay, well, a lot of people did. It looks like everyone did. So hopefully that's helpful. For the person who is taking notes, if you could please download or save it and share it with the other people in your groups. And I'm going to put in our email for George and I. You can share it with us. And could a couple people, you can in chat put what your key insight was or what you're committed to now. We only have a couple minutes, literally a couple minutes. Could a couple people maybe just very briefly say one key idea they got from this or one key commitment? And again, like a sentence or two, I apologize, but we're short on time. Not that short on time. Anyone like to say one key idea they got from the breakout room or one commitment they're willing to make?
Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, thank you.
Be brief, though.
Right. Racism, sexism, and classism challenges are going to be very different depending on where you are.
Sasha, do you want to say something? Or
Yeah, I was just going to say one of the things that we talked about was how do you motivate white men, and something that I realized as I was talking was I've stopped. One of the challenges for me is that I don't know that many of my white male colleagues at my school, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. And then I was like, wait, but we're in a room, and I'm in a room where I know no one, and so it's actually possible. It's like less scary. Maybe, and maybe what's like holding me back is just like, oh, like that self-righteous, like sort of like, oh, like my teachers can make, oh, he's like self-righteous or something. Like, what are they going to think of me? Or like, are they going to judge me or for knowing, like, you know, all that sort of like self-doubt is there. And that's really what's holding me back, and saying, oh, I don't know them is actually like not the reason. So that was useful.
Michael, can you be really, really brief?
One action I'm committed to is following up with Byron for a talk later on.
Byron's a great guy. He's a great guy. Do it. Okay,
that's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say.
Go ahead, Scott.
Okay, I'm putting in chat just one example of something you can literally do tomorrow, this coming week. Just in a nutshell, texting, phone banking. I know Byron knows this, George knows this, several people here know this. Phone banking is very, 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 very easy. They do all the training for you. The computer does it all for you. It's easy. That's a whole list of signups. That's just one out of many examples if you want to take action right away. So I'll turn it over to you, George, for the close.
Oh, yeah. I thought we were going to do the poll, weren't we?
That is part of the close. That's right.
Okay, so, I'm sorry.
No problem. We're going to do it simultaneously. We're going to put the poll in. We're going to give people time to do it. And you're absolutely right. Let me put the poll in.
Okay, what we want people to do is to take 3 or 4 minutes to fill out the poll and to how do they get it to us?
It's collected automatically. It's collected automatically.
Okay, and then we're going to do our closing.
Yeah, so I apologize. You can see we all make mistakes, and I did that on purpose to show you we all make mistakes. So we have this poll that was made, thanks to Justin. It's a Google document. It's in the chat now. If you could please fill it out. It's both feedback for us, and even more important, perhaps, is what topics do you want to see in the future? If there's any groups you think are important that we know so we can collect them, etc. So we're going to give you 3-4 minutes to do it now, and then George will do the official close.
Just as a heads up, I think the link that you shared allows us to edit the document or edit the form.
Okay.
It's not allowing you to edit?
Yeah, well, so like people are adding in their email and their names in the first questions. I think send in the top right corner.
I just sent the link. I put it in
Okay.
the chat, the link to so we can all fill it out separately.
Thank you,
Do I
Philip.
have to change the document? Is it not set up so people can, oh, they're do their individual thing. That's right.
So thank you, Philip, for doing that. I guess I didn't put the link in.
Some of the questions did get changed. So I think the first question you're looking for name optional, and the second one is our email address.
Okay, just give me 1 second. I apologize. Let me see, because I know the link worked earlier today. We looked at it, but maybe, do I have the wrong link here? Give me
Well, it's
1
okay.
second.
I went back into the first link that you sent us and just changed the questions back to their originals for name and email.
I think somebody edited it by accident again, though.
Wait a minute. I just put it in there. That should be the link. Is that working for folks? Again, I apologize if it's not. Does that look like it's working?
That link that you just put in is if we want to edit it, though. It's not the
Right, editing is adding information or ideas into it. That's your editing. Otherwise, you can't write in the document.
Okay, so let's
I
just
think.
be.
all right, we got another version.
The one Philip put in is the right one.
What were your key takeaways?
Now it looks all set up. Yeah, it's back to its original form.
Sorry for screwing up.
We're good to go.
Happens. Thanks, Philip, very much.
Whoa.
And Andy.
Thanks a village.
Maybe one more minute.
I think we give them 2 or 3, because you have 10 minutes for the close, being totally transparent here, so.
I'm going to allow a little more time for you to do that. And I want to thank the panelists and thank all of you for sticking with us for almost 2 hours now. You can keep writing as I'm going to start sharing some of the ending here. I'm putting in my own personal phone number right in chat now. If anybody wants help in connecting with other people here, or just would like to connect with me, that's fine too, obviously. But keep the email address callinginbuildingallies@gmail.com. You can always communicate with us and or try to connect in that way also. And we hope that all of you will see both the importance of working on your own personal space and your personal growth, as well as bringing in other men into the social justice work. And our future work together can include, we're planning at least one more workshop in 2023. We don't know when. If any of you are interested in helping me plan that, that would be great. Right now it's Scott and myself as it was for this workshop, but we got a lot of support from our panelists and helped us, and Andy's helped us a lot here. And then helping us figure out what, you can also just give us feedback as to what you think would be important. We want to focus on more on nuts and bolts and less on the personal side of it, although we need to bring the personal in, of course. Also, please network with each other, share resources. One man, I think he may be off the call now, is with Aware LA, which is an amazing group and has amazing resources, that you can learn from. We need to stop reinventing the wheel. And I want to say that we're really trying to support existing white men's groups as well, and white groups in general, like OWMCL and Surge and other groups there, and help network and communicate and support each other. It's not, I like this, but it's, and this is one thing, and we can do this. And one thing I think also is helpful, if some of you feel like you're inexperienced and you need help, reach out for getting support or mentoring from others that are here, or other men in general. We can try to connect you with a lot of there's a lot of good men here. And as George Hrbek really spoke well, support local efforts that are going on locally as well as national efforts. Don't reinvent the wheel in terms of efforts. There's a lot of stuff going on, and the big thing that's often lacking is white men or just us individually. It's fine to create new things as long as we're not competing with a lot of the good stuff going on. It's a way of getting involved. And build support like Men for Equity and Reproductive Justice, which Justin and Russell and I are created. We're trying to support women and trans people. We're not trying to compete with their efforts. We don't know what the right thing is to do. We're trying to learn from them and support their efforts. And Tom Weinrich, who was here earlier, and some of the other people have done great work in terms of phone banking and networking, and was a really great thing. Share resources, things, and connect with us, and connect again. Share the recording of this workshop when it's out with other white men. You can, and another thing, and one thing I think George said is often a source of getting white men involved is particularly when they're heterosexual, but not only that, is women in their life pushing them into getting involved. Right. And they don't have a responsibility to do that, but sometimes it's a good strategy. And also really take the time to sustain yourself. This work can be exhausting. Don't burn yourself out. It's more important that you be there. Also, and I would say this working with Scott, partner with people. Don't do things alone. And partnering doesn't mean it has to be 50-50. You may do 90% of the work, but have somebody there to back you up or to help you or to tell you to slow down, like I need to slow down right now. And finally, I want to just say that I'm going to stay on, and some of us may stay on after the call. If you want to talk or ask questions or make suggestions, that's great. And if you, the other thing is I'm happy to connect you, but some of you I don't know, and I don't have an email address. And there was confusion with setting up the Zoom link. And if somebody can take, or if Andy, or if it can save the chat. Yeah. The other thing is things like the chat are not going to go in the recording. And we're going to stop recording in just a minute, I imagine. But anyway, I think we're ready to close. I just want to thank everybody on behalf of Scott and myself and the panelists. And I know that the panelists want to thank you all for being supportive here. Anything else?
Actually, we got a minute left. We finished on time. So does anyone from the panel want to say anything? And if everyone else could just give some nice applause, and we will be staying for about 15 minutes that won't be recorded. But anyone on the panel, final 30 seconds of words, and please thank the panel, everyone. Because they're busy people, they gave time. Yeah, I'm sorry. George?
I'm happy to have been involved in this process, in the planning of the process, and now in this event tonight. Got to know some really good people that I didn't know before.
Likewise. Thanks, you all.
Thank you for listening. I'm excited to listen to you.
Okay. I would just say, Andy, please stop the recording. And now, we can wave goodbye, but you might show up in the video. And